There are moments in life where things get handed to you quickly. Words, expectations, other people's emotions. They don't arrive gently. They're passed mid conversation, midday, sometimes mid breath. And in those moments, you either grab them or you don't. For most of my life, I grabbed everything. I didn't pause. I didn't question it. If it was handed to me, I assumed it was mine to hold. If it was heavy, I adjusted my grip and carried it anyway. Recently, I let something fall. Not because I was angry, not because I was checked out, but because for the first time, I realized I didn't actually need to catch it. And that small moment told me more about my healing than any reflection ever did. You're listening to Purpose, Not Pity, a space for stories that hurt, heal, and remind you that you're not alone. I'm Erika Hernandez, storyteller, bonus mom, grieving mother, healing human. This isn't a podcast about having it all figured out. It's about showing up in the middle of the mess, rebuilding piece by piece, and choosing purpose, not pity. Whether you're deep in your own grief, trying to find your voice again, or just searching for a little light in the dark, this space is for you. Let's talk about it, all of it. Healing doesn't always show up in the ways we expect it to. It doesn't always come as confidence or certainty or clarity wrapped in pretty words. Sometimes healing shows up as restraint, as stillness, as the absence of your old reflexes. I noticed my body before I noticed my thoughts. There was no rush forward, no tightening in my chest, no internal scramble to explain myself, soften the moment, or make it easier for everyone else. I stood there longer than I'm used to standing. And in that space, a quiet question surfaced. It wasn't emotional or dramatic, just honest. Is this actually mine? That question alone taught me how much I've changed. Because there was a version of me who would have never asked it. She believed responsibility meant accountability, that accountability meant absorbing whatever came next, and that being strong meant being willing to carry more than her share. If something felt uncomfortable, she took it on. If someone else felt unsettled, she made it her job to fix it. If a moment felt heavy, she wore it, sometimes long after it stopped belonging to her. And she called that maturity. But what I'm learning now is that a lot of what we call being strong is really just being practiced at holding things we were never meant to keep. I was in a situation recently, and I'm not going to go into details because I don't know exactly who listens to my podcast, but something didn't go exactly as planned. It was nothing dramatic, nothing unsafe, nothing that caused harm, just human. I did what I've always done. I acknowledged it. I owned my part. I took responsibility. And then I moved forward. But what followed is what stayed with me. There was this quiet, unspoken expectation that I should keep holding it, that I should revisit it, carry the emotional weight of how other people felt about it, to sit with it longer than it was necessary, not for growth, but for the comfort of others. And in that moment, I saw something clearly. The old version of me would have turned that moment into a story about herself. She would have replayed it in her head, picked it apart, asked what it said about her worth, her capability, and her value. She would have worn it like a quiet punishment, even after everyone else had already moved on. But this time, that didn't happen. And that's when I realized healing had changed my relationship with blame. Healing didn't remove accountability from my life. It removed the need to suffer after accountability had already happened. There's a difference between owning your part and becoming the emotional landing place for everyone else's discomfort. And for a long time, I didn't know there was a difference. I thought being accountable meant being available for guilt, projection, anxiety, even if it wasn't mine. But healing taught me discernment. It taught me that not everything handed to you is an assignment. Some things are just reflections of what someone else doesn't want to hold. And I want to be careful how I say this because it is important. Not every moment of tension means you're being attacked. And not every uncomfortable situation means you're a victim. Sometimes people are just trying to hand you their own unease, their own anxiety, and their own shit. And healing is learning how not to confuse that with blame. That distinction really matters. Because when you don't know the difference, you end up living in quiet victimhood without even realizing it. You start asking questions like, why does this always fall on me? Why am I the one carrying this? Why does everything feel so heavy? But sometimes the weight isn't coming from the situation. Sometimes it's coming from the habit of catching everything. I see this everywhere now. In the job you stayed in too long because leaving feels like failure. In the relationships you try to save by carrying more than your share. In the dream you didn't get, the house that you lost, the version of life that didn't arrive. I see this in grief when we continue to carry the responsibilities for things we never had control over. When we replay the moments, the conversations, decisions, as if holding them tighter could change the outcome. Healing doesn't mean pretending things didn't hurt. It means refusing to turn them into proof that something is wrong with you. That's where purpose lives. Not in the pity, not in shrinking yourself so life feels easier to explain. Purpose shows up in awareness. In the moment you realize, I can acknowledge this without becoming it. I can learn from this without punishing myself. I can let this be human without it turning into my identity. That shift changed everything for me. And I've stopped asking myself why something happened to me, and I started asking what I was being invited to release from it. I stopped turning moments into labels. I stopped making myself the villain in stories that were simply part of being alive. And I stopped catching everything just because I always did. As this year comes to a close, I've been taking inventory, not of what I accomplished, not of what I survived, but what I'm done carrying. I'm done carrying other people's anxiety. I'm done carrying shame disguised as humility. I'm done carrying the need to prove my goodness by over-explaining or over-apologizing. I'm done carrying things just because I'm capable of holding them. Now, that doesn't make me detached. It makes me healed. And if you're listening to this while healing through something, a job that no longer fits, a relationship that ended, a loss that changed you, a dream that didn't come, or a life that took a different shape than you expected, I want you to hear this. You don't have to turn yourself into a victim to honor what hurt. You don't have to carry everything to prove you're strong. And you don't have to keep catching what's being handed to you just because you're used to it. Healing is learning when to hold and when to let it fall. Quietly, without resentment, without expectation, just with clarity. And that clarity is what I'm carrying forward. Not as pity, but as purpose. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening and holding space with me today. If something in this episode spoke to you, share it with someone who might need it, or just let it sit with you. That's enough. You can follow along on TikTok and Instagram at by Erika Hernandez for more stories, updates, and little pieces of healing in real time. And remember, this journey isn't about perfection, it's about presence. I'll see you next time, and until then, keep choosing purpose over pity.